Welcome back to another episode of Questions with Crocker with me, Dr. Crocker, your local emergency vet, and my husband, Shane.
Your local husband, Shane. From now on, I have equal title that you have.
So whatever I say, you're going to say?
Yes.
What if I say your surgeon extraordinaire?
Extraordinary husband. Husband extraordinaire.
So it's just whatever the adjective is.
That's right.
With your husband title.
Equal adjectives.
You could say entrepreneur.
I could.
Okay, so for anyone new to the podcast, I'm an emergency veterinarian, and then Shane and I together own a general practice small animal hospital in Fort Worth, Texas. I do some traveling, some speaking, and some social media, and we started a podcast because we wanted to listen to your questions, answer them about vet med behind the scenes, owning a practice, and pretty much anything else going on in our lives and in our industry. Is that why you started it?
I did not start this. I have been drug along.
Shane is my co-host, sometimes not willingly, but he's here and
I'm here.
He's making it. So we have our coffee this morning. We're ready to do a podcast. And then in 2 days, we go to AVMA in Austin. Oh, I'm supposed to do a better promo at the very beginning. So if you like our podcast and you want to hear more about vet med behind the scenes, follow us at Questions with Crocker on all the social media channels, including Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. If you want to leave a review, we would love to hear what you have to say and what you think about the podcast. So you can leave a review on Apple or Spotify. And if you want to watch our lovely faces instead of just listening to us on the radio, you can watch us on YouTube. But we definitely want more reviews. I think we're at 40-ish, which is not bad.
Reviews?
Because, yeah, that's pretty good.
I don't look at the reviews.
Well, all they do is talk about you and sing your praises. So speaking of singing your praises, so I was about to say that we are going to head to AVMA. It's in Austin, which I'll be honest. I mean, I like Austin, but I really like traveling out of Texas for conferences. So it's kind of like, wah, go to Austin right down the road. But we're going to be traveling there. And you officially are a speaker. How are you feeling?
I feel like the vet industry is taking a couple steps backwards.
If they deemed you speaker worthy?
Yes. They were going in the wrong direction.
So why don't you explain to everyone why you are coming to Austin and what your speaker status is due to?
But explain what now?
I was trying to hand it off to you so I could adjust my camera, and you totally fumbled.
I was drinking my Mountain Dew.
You totally fumbled that situation. We are professionals here. So explain why we are going to Austin and why you officially got speaker status, got free registration. You're going to have a badge. You're going to get to go in the speaker room with me. We've actually gone to conferences where they've denied
I've been kicked out of the speaker room.
you being able to go in the speaker room. But how did this come about? What are you going to do at the conference?
I think we're live podcasting, is my understanding.
Yes.
From the floor of the vendor area.
Obviously, I've prepped you well. Yes. So we are podcasting live on the exhibitor floor during the middle of the conference on Monday, and we're going to have 2 different sessions. So one is actually going to be with our good friend, Dr. Peter Weinstein, and we are going to pick his brain about practice ownership and resources that current practice owners should have. And if you want to own a practice, some of the things that you should have. I feel like you're going to have a fair amount of questions for him.
I probably will, yes.
And we owe him a hat because he wanted an Alta Vista hat, and I forgot last time we saw him. So, and then the second session is actually for Elanco, and we're going to talk about Parvo and the new canine Parvo monoclonal.
Oh, I had a lot of insight to that.
So I think you will actually, because our podcast certainly has a fair amount of veterinary professional listeners, but we also have a lot of pet owners that listen.
But they're family.
Well, at least our family will be more
they'll be more educated
on the treatment of parvo. But look at this. So if you're looking on YouTube, Elanco sent me this. It is a poop thing. It looks like real poop,
I'm surprised your
honestly.
son hadn't found that yet.
He actually, so Corbin saw this and he wanted me to keep it because he was like, that'll be awesome for pranks, Mom. And I actually have left it in kennels a couple of times at work and made it seem like they didn't clean the kennel. But it's a little dog and it says, be on alert, defend parvo and save 1 million puppies by 2030. It says parvo is poop. So it's got a little fake poop on there. But I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was funny. It's like a dog, pooping. And that's our lives in veterinary medicine. The other day we had an owner come in And she was trying to apologize for like her dog's smell. And I was like, ma'am, you don't even know the things that we experience and the smells that we have in this hospital. Like your dog barely smells like anything. So it was not a bad thing.
And
but
we have an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old. So
that is true. And I feel like she's getting smellier by the day and he is just gross. He's just a gross little boy. I've heard little boys are kind of gross and smelly and say inappropriate things, and we have like hit that stage all of a sudden. So definitely working on what is appropriate in a social setting with Corbin Crocker. So for this podcast, we do like to take people's questions, and so we're going to get into a question here in a minute. But first, I wanted to tell you about a case that I saw, and it's a case that kind of exemplifies why our jobs are so hard. So we had a 7-month-old intact female Frenchie come into the hospital, and this was at the general practice hospital. I was working a shift, and she came in, and initially it said for skin issues. Okay. Well, the skin issues were like she had no hair on her back and basically looked like she'd been burned really badly right above her shoulder blades. And it was a pretty large area. And then she had really thickened areas all over her skin, like hair loss. Her skin looked really, really bad. On top of that, she was an intact female and they wanted to breed her. And then they happened to mention during the appointment for the skin that she also had been throwing up and having diarrhea. And really, she had had minimal preventative care in her life, no deworming, and she had a very, very young owner. And so it was a little tricky because they really wanted to address the skin, which was like the thing they could see, right? Which is obvious. But they were on a very tight budget. Like what my estimate was and what I wanted to do, they had a quarter of that. So then the discussion becomes, I can help your dog, but if they can't afford for me to do all the things I need to do to help her, what can I actually do? And I think that's one of the hardest parts of our job is it's not always like knowing what needs to be done or what the diagnosis is. It's people not being able to afford what needs to be done. And they were actually very nice. We worked with them. We did what we could to like help her still. The problem is this dog needs long-term chronic care for her skin and for other things. And they really just don't have the means to do it. And this really young girl looked at me and she said she was really expensive. Like, I just don't have a lot of money left over. And it is so hard in those moments to not be kind of judgmental for people picking a breed that's so high maintenance and spending so much money on them, but not having the resources to take care of them. What are your thoughts?
Uneducated buyer. It looked cute, but they probably didn't do the research on overall maintenance. It's like buying a Porsche, right? You might can afford the Porsche, but the cost to change the oil is a lot more than in a Chevy.
Chevy. I honestly don't know anything about cars because I'd probably be that uneducated car buyer. But that's probably true. And the other thing was I did say, like, have you ever had a Frenchie before? And she said, yeah, I have another one. And he has no issues. This is the one that she was going to breed with,
So was this at our GP or at...
It was at our GP.
The other thing is, when you start a story, why do you always say it's intact? Why does that really matter?
Oh, that's a good question. So intact means that she has not.
I know what it means.
Spayed yet. She still has.
Why is that part of the description?
I'm explaining for other people that might not know what it means. So it means she still has her uterus. That is important because, in general, pets are intact for probably 2 different reasons. One would be because people want to breed them. And when you see a dog that has a lot of issues already at such a young age and people want to breed them, that's not ideal, right? Because some of those things could potentially be passed on to like the puppies. And also breeding is expensive and C-sections are expensive, which these dogs need. And so it is just something that is noted. The other thing is they haven't spayed because they can't afford to do it. And that also is sometimes a little bit of a red flag. So intact female is important because depending on the owner and the situation, it may indicate the level of care they're able to provide for their pet. It's interesting because overseas in Europe, they don't have as much of an issue with like overpopulation of pets and other things because a lot of people do spay or neuter, or they just have a lifestyle where pets don't come in contact and just have accidental breedings. And so here in the States, we just have a much bigger issue with it. And when you see intact males or females, it's just one of those things that you kind of have to delve deeper into why are they intact. And it kind of gives you a sense maybe of like where people's minds are at with like preventative care and with taking care of their pets. I don't know. Does that make me sound judgmental? Yes. Well, I think it's because also I work emergency. And so everything that's intact comes in because it has a pyometra, which is an infection in the uterus, or needs an emergency C-section, or has mammary cancer. So like I see all the side effects of.
So when the technicians go in and they document stuff, they document that on the front end.
Yes, absolutely. They say like, have they been spayed?
And now it's just part of your vocabulary when you describe something.
Yes. And it's really important because when you're talking and you're giving a signalment, which is like the age and the breed and the sex of the pet. So you would say like a 7-month-old intact female Frenchie, that would automatically in your head bring up some potential issues that the pet might have. And so it's always part of the signalment too, whether they're intact or not.
Now I know.
Now you know. Now you know. But back to my story, we were still able to help the pet, but not to the extent that I wanted to. And honestly, I did have to discount a couple things just because I just felt so sorry for this dog.
That's why these people need a wellness plan.
That's a whole nother podcast. Yes. Okay. So if you have wellness plans in your practice, message us because we've been talking a lot about it and whether we need to institute a wellness plan or not and if it's valuable. And I think from the data.
And how to administrate it.
Do what?
And how to administrate the wellness plan.
So that's my bigger issue is I think from the data, it actually shows wellness plans are valuable and you get people in the door more and they actually end up taking better care of their pets with wellness plans a lot of times. But actually like doing it and explaining it and taking those monthly payments or however you want to set it up, that sounds horrible and sounds like a big headache. So that's the bigger question is if you have wellness plans, do you feel like they're successful and what are the like pros and cons of it? So let's get back on the tracks. So it said, did you get a review when you were rejected? So a review is basically like looking at your application and saying, you know, these are the things you need to strengthen. And I did. So everything is tiered in points. And I really thought like I had everything I needed. And basically what they came back and told me is I didn't have enough vet hours in small animal. So I wasn't well-rounded enough because everything I was doing was in equine. And so I actually just took a time and went and worked at a small animal hospital in my year off, and then I reapplied. So that was something that was pretty easy for me to fix. Now, some people, they might tell you, you need to strengthen your grades. So then you need to retake classes and do more, or your recommendations. There's only so much you can change though, right? Like after you graduate, like it is going to be harder to move like your GPA. And so I would focus on other things. Like if there is a standardized test to get into that school, I would probably do test taking skills classes and try to strengthen that number versus trying to like change your entire GPA. Obviously recommendations, you can continue to try to strengthen those. Your essay, you can continue to try to strengthen, but mine was literally just hours and making sure that I fulfilled like all of them. So I looked more well-rounded. So that is what I did. And then this is kind of a good question. What did you do to move past the rejection and not just give in, like not just say, I'm not going to do it? And I don't know a good way to say this other than I was going to be a veterinarian. There was zero question in my mind that I was going to become a veterinarian. So giving up on that dream was just not an option. And maybe if it had taken me more than 2 times to get in, that would have been a harder thing. But there was never a time in the post-rejection phase when I didn't get into vet school when I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't do
Yeah, we started dating between those time periods. Like you were rejected, but before you started applying again.
You didn't reject me.
I did not. But I remember during the time we were dating, like I don't my mind was you're already in. Like I don't think I ever had a doubt that you weren't going to be a veterinarian either. Like even when you got in, I don't think I realized it was such a difficult thing to accomplish.
To do.
Yeah.
Well, and
so to me, it's a mindset, right? Like you'd already made your
is.
mind up. Like I'm going to be a vet. It's just a matter of where I'm going and, you know, where I'm going to get in at.
And that was probably one of the things that changed because I did have someone tell me, you know, applying to multiple schools shows that you really do want it. Like applying to one school looks very narrow-minded. So I did apply to the other schools and I did get into Mississippi State and LSU also, but I decided to go to A&M because of in-state tuition. And so I think that maybe if the first time around I had applied to more schools, I might have gotten into another school, who knows? But I really was happy where I ended up, because doing undergrad and then being able to do vet school in the same amount of time was
And
huge.
everything happens for a reason, right?
Yes.
I mean, the class you were in, the fact that we're able to meet. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen for a reason. So
I had a great gap year, because that is when I continued working at the 4-6's Ranch in Guthrie, Texas, which is where the whole like Yellowstone group is now. And I got to full out tons of horses. I got to, help with all this breeding operations. I got to just like be out in the middle of nowhere and barely be on the phone, and just, I don't know. It was a really great year to just figure life out and do what I really loved, and just work, and be exhausted at the end of the day. And I don't know, I feel like it was a good reset. And you got to visit me out there a little bit. And so that was exciting too. And now I can say, like, I worked at the famous 4-6's, and I actually was at the 4-6's Ranch, when I got my acceptance letter. So there was me and another girl I worked with, actually. And I went to we had like mailboxes, and it was a much thicker letter than the year before.
Is that Clarissa?
Yeah. A much thicker letter than the year before. And I was like, okay, this could be a good sign. And I opened it up, and it said, congratulations, you've been accepted to vet school. Immediately started crying. And she found out like at the same time, pretty much. And so both of us were very emotional. And I'm trying to remember, I think I called my dad first, and then I called you. I feel like that was probably the order of things, just because.
I would think your dad would have sent you that letter.
That might be what it is. I think I called him because he had forwarded it to me.
Probably.
Yeah. And told him the good news. And he was obviously over the moon. And then I called you and was like, guess what? But yeah, it felt very much like just a completion of like what I knew was going to happen. And I almost think you have to have that confidence, obviously as an ER doctor, but also like in veterinary medicine. So what are you doing right now? What are you doing? Our cat wants to be a part of things. Okay. So how long until you applied again? I just applied on the next cycle. And then how did I strengthen my application? I already answered that question. I found out where the holes were, and I strengthened it. I do think one of the other big things that people need to think about is like their recommendations. And I already had recommendations from people like actually at the vet school, because I had worked in large animal ICU. And I tried to make as many connections as I could with actual like Aggie veterinarians. I think that can make a difference a little bit. But people that really know you need to write your recommendations. It can't just be like your family vet that you've gone to like twice with. It needs to be someone who says like, I know this person. I think they're going to help our profession. I know they're going to add to the profession. It really needs to be as personal as possible, don't you think?
Yeah, I would be strategic through this whole process. Like you said, you went to work at the vet school, in the hospital, got to know doctors that were, in the mix, and got to know them well enough that they would write a recommendation. I mean, that's very strategic.
Yeah.
So
if I'm anything, I'm strategic. Always thinking ahead way too far. So, okay. So hopefully, Leslie, that answers your questions about applying to vet school, getting rejected, but continuing on and getting into vet school. And honestly, again, when people ask, like, would you do anything else? Could you see yourself doing anything else? I couldn't.
You'd be a dentist.
No. Ew. People's mouths are gross. Disgusting. Sometimes even with like pet smells, I'm like, ooh, with like tartar and drool and the smell, it's a lot. So, all right, that is it. Do you have anything else to add?
Nope.
Are you excited to go to Austin and be a speaker and be famous?
We have a tea time Sunday.
We are. We're going to golf with Dr. Emily King, with Dr. Salini. We're going to have Harrison there, who does our social media. So we're going to make some fun videos. It's going to be a good trip. I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to submit future questions through @Questions with Crocker. Leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. We'd love to hear your feedback, and watch us on YouTube if you get a chance. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful day.